we as artists, we know the value of art. You can only see what's kind of happening with this government at the moment. Yeah, soon we'll have, the NGV brought to you by Roads and Transport. With that going on, of course, there's a broad sector of the community who don't acknowledge or appreciate art in the same way that artists do. And, we're all here like, oh my God, why don't people get it? But it's because we're not a lot of the time focusing on communicating our art to other people and making it accessible and making sure other people can get it.
Welcome to another episode of In the Arts. This podcast is a deep dive into the arts industry where I talk to creative professionals about what they do and why they do it. I am your host, Tahney Fosdike, and in this episode I chat with sound designer, producer and composer Connor Ross. We talk about how sound is vital within the arts industry. We talk about how to collaborate with creators of different expertise, how to install sound art within a gallery space, and the onus on artists to ensure that their work is able to communicate with the public. Please stay tuned after our chat because we have some of Connor's theatre composition to play to you. Thank you so much for listening and enjoy the episode. Welcome, Connor. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you, Tony?
I am good. So outside of music, what other sort of artsy things do you enjoy?
I like to think I really enjoy all of the arts, I guess.
Yeah.
I've got a mum and a sister who are both visual artists. Sister writes as well. So I've kind of been raised, I guess, to appreciate all art and kind of value all art. I think that all art's kind of related as well. Like there's separate mediums, but there's quite often a common language.
I guess it always runs in the family, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When people are creative.
Yeah.
And I've got a cousin who says all the Fosdikes there, everyone's very creative, just no one's successful.
Not yet anyway, it'll happen.
Yeah. He's I think everyone's just really depressed. I'm like, okay. We got the neuroticism, but not the
Yeah, right, okay.
So what sort of things are you watching, reading, listening to lately?
I'll start with listening to because that's the easiest to answer because it's everything. I'm kind of always hunting down new music, I guess, like listening to a lot of jazz and that kind of stuff, but it's pretty broad. Been getting quite back into Nujavis, who's a Japanese kind of hip-hop producer who's really brilliant. Reading, I've not had a lot of time for reading recently, but I am hopefully going to get back into it. I'm a quarter of the way through The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, reading that for the first time.
Cool.
Which I've been a quarter of the way through for probably a year now. Yeah, so that. Watching, what am I watching at the moment? Been quite into His Dark Materials, which is the new HBO recreation of the Philip Pullman series, which I read when I was a kid, were absolutely brilliant. I'm watching those. But yeah, I guess I'm just kind of always flittering between things. I guess.
Yeah, seems like you across quite a lot.
Yeah.
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 With fiction books, I'm always that much through, and then I'm when my brain is free, I'll pick that back up again.
Yeah. I'm really bad at, I really like sci-fi books, which is my dad's bad influence. So when I get a sci-fi book, I'm really good at kind of just smashing through it, but I'm really bad with other genres, I guess. It's not like I don't like them. I'm just where's the lasers and the stuff?
Yeah. I'm I read a lot of essays and kind of philosophy books where there's a real present argument that I can really latch onto, and I can really relate it back to kind of the things I'm thinking about and seeing in the news and things. But when it comes to fiction, I'm it just seems so fluffy. I know there's themes there that are you can translate them, but I'm I just kind of I've been reading Outlander for like a year, and
okay.
it's kind of just when I'm feeling really lazy.
Sure,
I pick it up again and go back into it because it's just like, historical time travel,
It's like the exact opposite of my problem. Like,
Yeah.
like, I need the real arguments, and I'm like, I just need the fiction and the
the escape.
The escape.
Yeah. Do you remember your first connection with music?
I guess
or sounds.
Yeah. Mum and Dad always have played like lots of music around the house. So I'm not sure about like the first connection, but just like always as a kid, on weekends there'd be musicians like Dad played a lot of Nick Cave and Tex Perkins and like Miles Davis and Jeff Buckley, Nick Drake, all those sorts of people. I just listed a lot of men, I realised. So there was always music in the house, I guess, which sort of allowed me to, I guess I grew up listening to it, and so I've always been around it, always been able to appreciate that stuff. And so that particular music is also very nostalgic for me. Like there's particular Tex Perkins albums, for example, that when I listen to them, I'm just instantly taken back to a kind of a place in my childhood.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
And at what point did you kind of start latching onto that creative practice and you were like, this is something I want to pursue?
I guess probably when I was in high school, living in South Coast, New South Wales, there was a good folk festival every year. So I got to start going to that and seeing a lot of kind of amazing international folk artists come through. Excuse me. And getting really inspired by that, and also just which a lot of people, I guess, have the experience just having an amazing music teacher. When you have a fantastic teacher, it really goes
definitely.
such a long way.
Yeah.
And that just someone who's so supportive and always kind of giving us opportunities and wanting to push us to play outside of the school environment.
Yeah.
So that really just, I guess, being surrounded by that in that place really inspired me to want to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, that is even more important to have good teachers in regional towns, I found, because I grew up in a regional area and a lot of people grow up and stay there where there's like no problem with that either. But if you are someone who's kind of itching to do more, unless you have someone that kind of says that's okay you can do it unless let's push you, you're never going to feel like you can actually get over that barrier.
Absolutely. Just, absolutely.
And where did you train after high school?
So after high school, I moved to Melbourne and studied at RMIT. So I did a Bachelor's of Art in music industry. Yeah.
Cool. And so you, I guess, were playing a lot of music at the time and you were defining yourself as a musician, but now you've kind of gone more into sound design and composing. So what was your initial attraction to kind of the cycle of writing, producing and performing?
It's a really good question. I guess I'll start with the performing aspect, because that's probably the thing that captured me earliest, I think. There's a certain kind of rush of exhilaration or adrenaline when you're performing on stage, and there's lots of people there and it's a really good show that I certainly haven't experienced in any other way. Yeah. Which is, it's a more immediate, there's other ways where you do a project and you get a real sense of gratification out of it. But it's a more stable, I'm not sure how to explain this, a more kind of stable, grounded feeling. Whereas, and I'm going to use the old kind of adage of a rush when you're playing a really good gig, which is just so exciting. but also on the same, by the same token, when it's not good, it can be the complete opposite. It can really kind of crush you. But I guess as a kid in high school, I had a couple of those good gigs, and I was like, oh, shit, I want to do this.
Yeah.
Sorry, am I allowed to swear on
this?
Of
course.
Yeah, okay. So that was the performance aspect of it. And I guess writing, and I guess I initially started writing with performing in mind. So I'd always, when I was kind of younger, I'd always be writing music, writing in my head with sort of how will this instrument be played on the stage, and how will we build this kind of thing. And nowadays, I don't know, I can't really think of a way to describe the feeling of just kind of sitting down and writing music.
Yeah.
In a way that's not. So there's kind of writing music where you're a bit self-conscious of it, but there might be people around you, which is a bit weird. But when you're kind of just in the zone, just writing music or writing anything, I guess, it's just a nice kind of cathartic thing. I think I always enjoyed that. Yeah.
And how has this developed since kind of those late teen years until now?
Yeah. Intermittently, I think. There's definitely periods where I've really enjoyed writing and done a lot of it, and then periods where I've kind of not been able to. For me, I think that's a lot to do with the space that I'm in.
Yeah.
Like the physical space. I guess, as somebody in their early 20s living in a city, I am renting and I'm moving around a fair bit, and some places will feel better than others, and that really does affect the kind of creative process.
Yeah, especially in a share house environment as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And you're always wanting to, you'll wake up like in the middle of the night with a great song idea.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, my housemates are asleep. I can't do this now. So that's definitely place for me. Not in a sense of like being inspired by a place, but just in a sense of feeling comfortable in a place is really
definitely
important in that kind of writing process. And I think I can track my kind of my connection to writing music for myself as opposed to a brief, I guess. To do with the places I've been in and how comfortable I've been in them.
Yeah, cool. And how have you developed more into dipping into the worlds of more like theatre and sound art and things like that?
So I guess I was doing a bit of sound engineering and thought I should try a bit of theatre just as a way of diversifying my skill set, basically. And knew a couple of people who were doing kind of independent theatre. So got involved in a show there. Yeah. And just became really immediately kind of hooked on the way that theatre particularly is such a collaborative thing. Where you're working with a whole bunch of different creatives in different fields, and you don't really understand what it is that they do, but you're all kind of working towards, lights and sound, and working towards making the same moment feel right. Which is just really fantastic, and it's different to music, at least when you're a solo artist, which can be a very lonely thing. So I got really into theatre basically because of that. Started doing more and more of it, and as I started doing more shows, and every show is so different in the theatre, that got me more interested in pushing the boundaries of sound, I guess, because different shows would have different requirements. Some might be really simple, just some music, but others might have kind of wacky things going on with microphones and surround sound and that kind of stuff. So being in that environment and wanting to push that in certain ways got me more into how can I use sound as a tool to sort of tell different stories, I guess.
Yeah, cool. I guess that kind of leads to the next question that I sort of had, which is a bit kind of abstract, so I'm sorry if it's, if you struggle to find the language to describe it. So obviously you've got this, your life revolves around your connection to sound, and both sort of music to sound art to working with theatre productions. So I assume this comes from both, sort of innate desire to connect with sound, but also intense training. So how did you hone a relationship with sound?
Excuse me. I think just by listening a lot.
Yeah.
And I think this probably can apply to any, at least any creative discipline, that you just get better by seeing what else is out there. Musically, I try to listen to so much music and get different ideas from it, and I try to be really aware of just the sounds around me in the day-to-day, I guess, because there can be some really incredible, beautiful things happening naturally in sounds. Sometimes a pedestrian crossing buzzer just has a really good rhythm to it, which is fantastic. And you're like, oh, okay, how could I use that idea? But I think there's when I was at university in our first year, one of our prescribed texts was this great book by an author called Austin Kleon, called Steal Like an Artist. Yeah. It's just a really short book, but basically it's just about how to steal appropriately ideas from other artists, and that I think basically a lot of the work that I do is me trying to copy something someone else has done, not being able to do it exactly, so it ends up being my own thing with my own kind of twist on it. And just that process of just trying to expose myself to as much stuff as possible really does it, I think.
Is it ever overwhelming?
Oh yeah. No, all the time, because you see or you listen to something and you're like, wow, this is brilliant. I'll never be able to achieve that at all. And then I guess just in the process of trying to achieve it, you stumble on your own thing, and then you just get sidetracked with that, and that's okay. And, I think just it's about being really aware and trying to acknowledge that your practice is always going to be different to anybody else's. And every no matter how similar different artists might be, everyone's got their own niche. And your niche isn't really going to compete with other niches.
And it's so interesting, it's like that, you're constantly borrowing, because that is so true with all forms of art. I remember reading a Jerry Saltz Instagram post, who is a really big New York art critic, and he was really like, everyone get over yourself, all art is stolen, it's fine. If you want to grab someone's photograph, rip it up and stick it on a canvas, that is your own art. We're all kind of dipping in and out of the world and borrowing what we need to kind of create our own ideas. And I think saying that doesn't happen is kind of like arrogant as well, because like everything comes from somewhere.
Absolutely.
You can't invent things out of thin air. Like, you're always going to be influenced, and it's just how you interpret it into your own product is where the kind of beauty of it lies.
And I mean, nothing's created in a void. Like, anything you create is at least influenced by the world around you or your own experience of the world. And if you wanted to take a really broad view of what art is, you could say there's a lot of art in how people interact with the world. And so, yeah, anything you make is still ripping off art somehow, whether it's art as published art, and for those listening at home, I just did quotation marks, or life art, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of like where you are now with that relationship with sound, do you have any sort of goals of where you want to take that?
Yeah, it's a tricky question because I'm kind of not. I guess I've got my fingers in a few pies at the moment, so to speak. I think the cool thing with sound is it is still, at least I think, an under-recognized and developing field. Yeah. So even in theatre, a lot of the time people don't really kind of acknowledge what sound can do for a show. Yeah. And sound art, certainly, you know, the only people who care about sound art is sound artists, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's so true. When I was researching for this episode, I was reading this interview with a sound artist, and the questions they were getting asked, he was just being so passive aggressive. They were like, oh, so like, what is sound art? And the guy was like, well, what's visual art? Like, you know, it's not this, you know, tiny thing, you know, it can be anything and everything. It's just the medium. But I guess it is kind of like an under-recognized form of expression.
Yeah. And I think there's probably a bit of issue there in sound art that it's often so technical. You know, a lot of the time sound art is not about the beauty of the thing that's created, but it's about what the process was to get there. Yeah. And that can be interesting to a certain group of people, but not as a kind of a broadly appealing artwork. Yeah. Yeah. What was the original question though?
I don't think I can remember, but if we are talking going to more of the sound art sort of thing, because we can talk about your project Spaces in Between, which is one of your sound art projects, which is, you know, you use composition to fit seamlessly into the gaps of natural soundscapes and environments. Can you explain this project?
Yeah. So speaking of art that's more about the process than the beautiful result, this is pretty wanky. So Spaces in Between, basically, there's a lot of kind of developing research over the past excuse me. There's a lot of developing research over the past couple of decades, I guess, that's kind of showing how important sound is to natural environments, particularly. Yeah. Different birds will call at different pitches and counterrhythmically to each other. There's been studies that have shown that you know, a plane passing overhead will cause whole populations of frogs to fall silent for hours at a time. In which case, you know, a bunch of predators come and eat them. Yeah. And it's just because they can't compete with the sound of you know, a plane for a few seconds. And similarly, you know, when cars get introduced to environment, whole insect species leave. So I was kind of looking at some of that research and getting really interested in this idea of the natural mix of environments. And so Spaces in Between is a extension of that, whereby I am going to different environments. So I've been to a few places around Victoria, like Wilson's Promontory National Park and a few other places. And I'm recording the sounds of those environments, a bunch of different environments, and then doing what's called a spectrographic analysis of them, which basically just gives me a visual graph of what frequencies are appearing across a recording and what time and rhythms are there. and then I have this visual representation of where things are and where things aren't in a natural soundscape. So then what I'm doing is I'm finding those gaps and introducing sort of music and composed elements to try to seamlessly fill in the gaps and suggest kind of a way in which human created sound, I guess, can fit in a more natural, less competitive way with natural environments. Yeah.
I mean, I guess in the way that project kind of just talks about how sound can help us connect to our natural environments in a more sustainable way, which can kind of link back to our, really hardened climate anxiety at the moment, where, we're really trying to figure out how to live in sync with the natural environment and stop harming it. Because humans are kind of, trying to dominate the world, and we're causing a lot of issues. So what sort of power do you think sound has to kind of mitigate these issues?
I think it's really tricky because people who are aware of these things let me say that again. A lot of the time, the people we're talking to are people who are already aware of these things.
Yeah. Preaching
and
to the choir sort of issues,
exactly. And it's, if I say sound is, how we will heal our environment, all the soundies will go, oh man, that's so right.
Yeah.
And everyone who's not will be like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah. I guess as you're saying as well, it's like a lot of it's to do with the process as well, to getting that rather than the listening aspect of it. Because I was programming for the Environmental Film Festival, and I think we got like a lot of soundscapes submitted. And as a programmer, just seeing them, you don't know what's kind of the whole story behind them, and you're just hearing the result, which is quite tricky in a way, because you don't understand what it's trying to communicate.
Yeah. I think I have a little ideal, I guess, with spaces in between. The kind of result of what comes out of it when I do this is that I will kind of install it in in public places or in exhibitions or galleries or whatever. As kind of like surround sound things, and my kind of thinking, and I don't know how bullshit or not this is, but my thinking is that when people hear or see things out of the context that they're naturally in, they take more notice of it.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, if I present someone the sound of a natural environment, the sound of a national park within a gallery space, when they're in the gallery space, they'll be like, oh wow, I can hear that. I'm taking note of everything that's there.
Yeah.
And then if they then go to that actual location, I'm hoping they'll then be more aware of it.
Yeah.
So be like, oh, I heard this over there. Now I'm hearing it here. Wow, I get the context of it.
Yeah, cool. So it's a way of kind of building awareness in a way.
And I think the more you notice something, the more you respect it.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of the problem, is that people just kind of they're not aware of, and they don't acknowledge the existence of. Well, that sounds a bit kind of a bit harsh, but they don't consciously acknowledge these kind of natural environments and how different things can affect them.
I know you mean, like, this is a bit of a weird example, but I kind of feel like that way about birds, because I think for a long time birds were just birds to me, and they just they were just there.
Birds are just birds. Yeah.
They were just around, and kind of like over time I just learnt more about birds and started observing birds more. And now when I see birds, I'm just kind of like really overwhelmed, but I'm just like, this is like, they're so amazing. And I get to see them every day, and they're so intelligent, and they're these mini dinosaurs.
Yeah.
And they're so pretty and smart, and Yeah, and you just, now I've got this kind of this awe of them.
Yeah.
And I just can't even imagine the fact that I used to just kind of take them for granted.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
In a way, and they used to just be, these things that were just kind of,
Yeah.
And that's kind of funny as well, because I did grow up in the countryside and there were more birds, and maybe it is kind of being more in the city where you do take more appreciation of those like little things.
Yeah, and I think it is that kind of thing though, because in the country there's so many birds and you're surrounded by birds all the time. Whereas in the city, if I hear a bird call, I'm like, wow, what is that?
Yeah.
Like, that's not a tram. Like, and it's so you do become more aware of it. And
I was even reading about someone who kind of she kind of learned how to communicate with crows in the city, and then these certain crows got to know her and they were her friends, and they would find her in different parts of the suburb and walk with her and stuff. It's quite bizarre.
Cool.
But yeah, it is that sort of thing. I think we could go more into like the industry that you're kind of working in. What I find really interesting about you is that you've kind of got your tentacles across all these different sort of industries, music, but also more artsy landscape, but also theatre. I'm kind of wondering, which is where you feel most at home?
Oh, geez. Either way I answer this, people are going to be offended. Look, yeah, that's interesting. I think I like to take a I don't know, utopian approach to it. In that I don't think there really is kind of strict separate arts sectors like people make them out to be.
Yeah.
I think when I'm working in theatre, what I'm doing is I'm making music. When I'm when people are putting on a live gig, a show, so often it's the performative aspect of it. People are drawing from theatre. There's people use visual art to create album covers. In theatre, there's visual art in how you design a space. I think, I just like, I sort of tell the story all the time. My mum's a visual artist who has basically no kind of music knowledge other than a love for it. I'm a musician who has basically no knowledge of visual art other than a love for it, and we'll talk with each other, in using our language to describe each other's practice. Yeah. So mum will often sort of describe music in terms of light and shade and palettes and that kind of thing, and I'll talk about mum's art or about art in terms of the like the rhythm or the timbre of it, which is just kind of different words for the same thing, I guess. Yeah. And I think music's very visual, and I think art's very musical, and so I guess back to the original question of what industry I feel more at home in, I'd say the arts industry. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally know what you mean. It's one of the reasons I was kind of have taken the approach for this podcast that I have, is that I'm kind of, grabbing all different creative professionals, because I feel like it's the same feelings and ideas that kind of link everyone. People just kind of choose to express it in different ways, which is just totally cool as well, because it's just amazing how many ways people can be creative. And so kind of going from that, aside of your more musical practices and performances and stuff, often you're a sound engineer or a composer, that sort of thing. So you're working outside of musical performance, where someone might be coming, you're working with people or audiences which are totally focused on music, which I guess you talked about before. Well, when you're part of a larger project, the music is important, but it's not the main focus. So I'm just wondering, in kind of that sort of idea, what sort of projects are you interested in working on? For instance, with theatre, are you picky with what shows you go towards?
Yeah. Yeah, kind of. I think, like touching on that, it is tricky because, particularly in theatre, people aren't there to hear the sound design. And you have to be, so often I'll create a wild bit of music that I'm like, I love this bit of music. And then I put it in, watch it in a rehearsal with the music, and it's completely upstaging the text,
Yeah.
And the text is actually the most important thing, I guess, to make on the show.
But it is so critical as well. It's like, I think, it's cinema and how important sound is, which I think people understand, but you might not be focused on it.
But it just means that you have to really, a lot of the time you have to really simplify. So just be like, okay, this is too complex. I just need some underscoring here. It has to be really simple. I just have to capture the right mood.
Yeah.
Yes, in terms of the kinds of shows I like to work on, I guess I've settled into a bit of a style, which is quite, I guess, texturally rough, and I like a bit of moodiness and a bit of tension.
Yeah.
So I like doing plays that allow me to explore that.
Yeah.
But also, the reason I love theatre is because every show is really different. And I learn different things every show. I do, and I explore different things. Yeah. So I just like doing projects that are different to something I've done before. Yeah, and being able to explore different things.
And how do you kind of locate and interpret a vision for a show?
That can be the trickiest thing, is kind of finding the right, matching your interpretation with that of a director and that of a lighting designer and the cast, and coming together on that. It mostly comes down to just communication, which I think is just, it's the trickiest thing in theatre, because what's great about it, in that you're working with people who have different disciplines and know different things, is also what's challenging about it, because everyone has different experience, and my knowledge of my department is not the same as my knowledge of lighting or directing, and vice versa. So the more you work with people, the more you get to learn when they say a thing, what they mean by that thing. Yeah. But otherwise, normally it's just a lot of trial and error, I think, with sound. Yeah. I think lighting's different, because once you kind of have a vision, you can just literally create that vision. Yeah. And
I guess it's easier for the director to communicate.
Yeah, because directors who don't know how lights work at least know how lights looks. Yeah. Where sound is so broad, and so every sound design has such a different process. But it's normally a lot of trial and error of creating a piece of music or an ambience or something like that, putting it across a scene, and then being like, oh well, this is so wrong. Let me try again and again until you find something that feels kind of right, and then it's about detailing and just adjusting from there.
Yeah, awesome. That's interesting. It sounds like you're a very good listener in terms of discovering what people want. And I guess that's kind of like such a good advice for people who are going to like creative collaboration. Because I find even with like collaborating, I'm always like, oh, if I just did this myself, I'd be done so much quicker and so much easier. Often you kind of think some people assume collaboration makes things easier, but sometimes it makes things more difficult because there's so many different people's perspectives, and it's just about being a very patient person and being a good listener and communicator to kind of find that sweet spot where it all works out.
Yeah, I think it's also about just towing that fine line between doing that, between listening and working with what other people want, but also between acknowledging that you are there because you're the expert in your field. Yeah. And you know best about certain things.
Yeah,
and sometimes
definitely.
you just have to tell people, no, this is the way it needs to be.
Yeah.
Trust me.
Straddling that line.
And it's a very tricky line to balance. And it's all about the relationships you can form with people.
Yeah.
In that you're able to do that, to say no to them.
Yeah. And I guess kind of going back to what we were talking about before in terms of, you know, it might not be the main aspect of the production, but it is a very important part of it to influence the overall production. Can you tell me about a certain show where you really felt the music and the audio that you produced had a real instrumental effect on how the message or the entire production resulted?
A show I did recently as part of Melbourne Fringe, Lake Disappointment, which is written by two playwrights, Lachlan Philpott and Luke Mullins. Really brilliant show. This one was directed by Gavin Roach as well, I should say. But basically the whole essence of that show was one character on stage the whole time. It was very, very still.
Yeah.
And we staged it in this big kind of cavernous space, and it was really simply lit. So the actor, Tim Clobber, just had to be so still for the whole show. And everything was about the kind of micro body movements. So sound became really important. Because there was this tension going through the whole show over this character's identity and understanding of themselves, I guess. But the actor couldn't really show that because it was all kind of internalized and it was all kind of monologue. So the sound just became so big and built so much for it. It probably sounds like tooting my own horn a bit, but the show wouldn't have had the same impact without that sound, because it was another character that carried that tension, and the actor was able to respond to it, and it responded to the actor. That was really great for me, because it's basically a blank canvas to just play with, I had the liberty to go really big and bold. But sometimes it's much subtler than that. Yeah. Sometimes it's just about a little shift, because I guess so much of a text of a play or of anything is so much open to interpretation, and the way you say a line can mean a dozen different things. Yeah. And so often just a little shift in the sound can just change how people feel in a moment. Which wouldn't have happened otherwise. Yeah.
Let's go back to talking more about sound arts. Sorry for people listening to be jumping back and forth, but kind of more the context of how it's shown, because we're just talking about music, performance, and then production. But then with sound art, I'm just wondering how much you think the art sector, such as galleries, give to showcasing experimentation with sounds.
Not much at the moment. There's stuff that's emerging. But I think sound art is generally an aspect of another exhibition. So there'll be like something at the NGV that has a whole suite of things, and in one room there's a thing that has a bit of cool sound going on. But it's rare to see it standalone. There are certain organizations now, or groups who are doing things. So in Melbourne, there's a group called Liquid Architecture who are doing really cool things and really promoting sound art and sound experimentation. And Mess as well, who do a lot of wacky synthesis stuff. But I haven't, at least I haven't personally seen kind of exhibitions of just sound art. And it's probably a really tricky thing to sell because like we were talking about earlier, people outside of it don't get it, and that's a problem with us as people in the field for not really communicating what we're doing and not making it accessible.
How do you think someone who might be going to a show that has, I guess there's two parts of this, that perhaps how could, a curator, what is like the best way for them to have an installation that is quite communicative as a mediator between the artists and the audience, but how can the audience also be more equipped to viewing or hearing these sorts of projects?
I think people connect with it's probably a bit of a cliche, but people connect with stories. So I think it's about creating a story in the work. So a lot of sound art can be brilliant, but it's about it's kind of it's just a mood, or it's a process that's created a result, but there's no narrative to it, and so there's no emotional connection for people. It's a technical thing. And art is about emotion. So I think with it just means like a lot of the time, if I was putting spaces in between in a gallery, I'd want to accompany it with visuals and with explanations, and so people know what they're hearing as they go into it, and maybe they can see the spectrograph and and just I guess with I don't know. It's just about I think it's just about creating a journey and creating a narrative in the work.
Definitely.
And that's, I think, sound art as a developing field is very much about. It's not doing that a lot of the time. It's not giving people a journey. It's just throwing them into a state. And that's what we have to work on, I think.
Definitely. It's always such a hard line to straddle as a creative person or an artist to, creating something that is, arts for art's sake, and being the experience of creating that, but also making it receptive to someone who's going to see it, but not kind of just how much importance you place on them, because, it's not marketing and it's not a Disney movie. Like, it doesn't have to be completely transparent, but it needs to be something that you can still latch on to.
And I think with all that, once you've made it, it's not yours anymore. And the whole point is that it is for the observer. I don't know. I go back and forth on this a bit about whether art is for the person making it, or whether we as the people making it should be thinking about the people consuming it. And I think it's a bit of both, because I think, we as artists, we know the value of art, but clearly you can only see what's kind of happening with this government at the moment, getting political here with kind of cuts to arts funding. And
at the time of recording, they got this. It's the weekend of when they got rid of the arts department altogether, just slashed.
So soon we'll have the NGV brought to you by Roads and Transport. But clearly with that going on, of course there's such a there's a broad sector of the community who don't acknowledge or appreciate art in the same way that artists do. And, we're all here like, oh my God, why don't people get it? But it's because we're not, a lot of the time, focusing on communicating our art to other people and making it accessible and making sure other people can get it. And I think as much as creating art is about doing something for yourself, there needs to be some if you're creating art publicly, then needs to be thought about.
Otherwise, it's so elitist as well.
Exactly,
like, I worked on an exhibition once, and none of the artists I was working with wanted wall text or labels or anything. They just wanted their art to kind of sit there and I was like, well, what's the point of exhibiting it other than to give yourself a pat on the back? What is it there for where people come and have a look? It is needing to kind of offer something to the public in a way, that helps. Well, it doesn't even necessarily need to help, but just for something to, that's worth them, leaving their house, coming to you, plugging their headphones or whatever, to be like, this is offering them something to help them live their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It'd be cool to go on to, I think the only thing we haven't really touched on is that you do so much stuff.
Too much stuff, yeah.
So much. You also produce some community events, mostly about collaborative music making, such as Songs and Songs. So what are your events and kind of where do they fit in within the larger music scene in Melbourne?
Yeah. So the main one I've kind of established recently, when I say established, we've done one show, and I'll do another one next year, and it'll grow from there, is a show called Songs on Song. And basically, I guess the thinking behind making it was... So, I've been to plenty of folk festivals. I've also been to plenty of gigs in Melbourne. And, I'm sure there'll be people who'll be like, oh, you're full of shit, kind of, this isn't even the case. But in my experience, at a folk festival, there's this great kind of... you get these kind of songwriters in the round things. There's beautiful kind of relaxed family environments where people can come and see music and stuff. But then outside of that kind of environment, when you're in Melbourne, it's a gig. It's, this person's set and this person's set and this person's set. And, there's a few exceptions here and there, but there's not a lot of that just kind of warm, sit down music discussion kind of vibe. So I wanted to start to create a show that would do a little bit more of that. Not to say there isn't any of that going on. But so the concept behind Songs on Song was that we get like 4 different musicians, solo artists of sort of slightly different backgrounds, whack them on a stage together. They all take it in turns to play a song, but it's a game of free association.
Yeah.
So,
is there an audience there, or is it just...
Yeah, absolutely. So it is like a gig, so people buy a ticket and come along and sit in the audience. But it's a game of free association. So, one person starts with the song, and then the next person on the spot has to be like, okay, so that song was about the color blue, so I guess I'll sing a song about feeling blue, for example, and it goes around like that.
That's cool. Yeah.
And what's really cool about that, what we saw at the first show in April this year, was that people you don't just get to hear really beautiful songs, but you get to kind of see thought processes and see what artists what they think their song's about, and also sometimes them finding new things that their song's about, or kind of making up new things their song's about, so that they can link it in and play like that. And that's a really cool thing to see. And I think that at least for me as an audience member was really cool to kind of watch a process and watch the thought behind an artwork. Yeah,
it's fun.
Yeah, it is fun.
Instead of it being like kind of like a, these great musicians up here performing us to these us people down here, it kind of, it's a bit more open.
Totally.
So why did you create something like, I guess you kind of talked, you already touched on that, but, Melbourne's such a big place. There's a lot of music here. In what ways do you think music and music events can build up community?
I think I in a lot of ways. I think so in a place like Melbourne, people, their whole kind of lives can be built around a music community. So there's such strong, like there's a jazz community, there's the hardcore community, and on in Melbourne, where you get people who they're the thing that they're about is going to these shows and connecting with people, and not just the musicians, but the people in the audience as well. And that can be really valuable, but also in small communities in regional areas and country towns, it's not the same that people will build their life around it. Yeah. But it can be, like where I'm from, a small town in New South Wales, with the folk festival every year. It's like the one event of the year where where the whole community comes together and everybody loves it, and it's so fantastic, and people are building up and talking about it for the whole year, and it's so important to have those sorts of events or those sorts of things in small communities.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because otherwise, in so many small communities, things can get really divisive. Definitely, and so you need these big things to keep people together like that. And music's such a good tool for that.
Yeah, I remember where I grew up, every year there was Battle of the Bands. Yeah, right. And that was great because it was such a, it was a country town, but it wasn't didn't have like the best reputation either. So there was a lot of restlessness and youth restlessness. And it was just a really nice event in way to kind of bring, a lot of teenagers together and let them have like fun and be a little bit wild, because it wasn't like anything for people to do. I remember just, them building a skate park kind of helped with that as well. Like people just want something to do, and they want a sense of community and to have fun.
Yeah. I think that's, that for me is so much what art is about, it is a way for people to connect with each other. And it's an outlet for energy, and it doesn't have to be about how good the song is or the painting on the wall. It can be about the people coming together to make that, or the people coming together to view that, and that's a power in art that doesn't exist in other sectors. I think we can link back, so I've just remembered I forgot to ask you something at the very beginning, because you're just speaking about what art does for the community. But for you, as someone who might be an audience rather than a creator, what does art do for you? It's everything, I guess. As kind of wanky as that sounds. I think through art, I've connected with people that I never would have connected with. I've been able to be a part of events and see things that I never would have seen before. But I guess just in terms of experiencing it, it is a tool for allowing us to understand ourselves and the world around us. I think when if I'm at a fantastic gig and everyone's loving it and I'm loving it, there is a connection with the whole room there, which is in a weird kind of way. It allows us to kind of understand our place in the universe a little bit. And making art, it even if I'm not consciously aware of it, it's allowing me to understand where I'm at in life. It's just I think it can do so many things with people, and it's not just artists, but people who are seeing it or hearing it or watching it or whatever. And the limits are boundless in what it can do.
Thank you so much for plugging in and listening to my little podcast today. If you want to hear more of In the Arts, episodes are on all podcast apps like Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, etc. Wherever you find your podcast, it will be there. Admittedly though, this is a bit of an experiment for me. I have no performance or public speaking experience, so I'm coming to this very green. So it would mean the world to me if you could let me know if you are listening and enjoying the show. You can do so by subscribing on one of those podcast apps. You can leave a review, which would be lovely, or you could even just do something like popping a screenshot of the episode in your Instagram story. You can tag me. My Instagram is TahnSuperdry, like the beer Hans Superdry. I'll pop this all in the show notes. Again, thanks for listening.